The snow had been falling for 3 days straight across the northeastern state, piling up in drifts taller than most children. Weather forecasters called it the worst blizzard in 20 years. Wind howled through empty streets as most people huddled in their homes, waiting for the storm to pass. Not everyone had that luxury. Andre Thompson sipped his lukewarm coffee and squinted through his windshield at the nearly invisible road ahead. His old Subaru's heater worked just enough to keep the windows from fogging completely. The car's tires crunched through the fresh snow as he carefully navigated the back roads he'd come to know well since moving to the area 8 months ago. Probably should have stayed home today, he muttered to himself, turning down the local radio station that kept repeating the same emergency announcements. The governor had declared a state of emergency hours ago, urging all residents to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. But Andre needed the money. His mother's medication wasn't going to pay for itself, and the home healthcare nurse was coming tomorrow. He'd been driving for rideshare companies for nearly 2 years now, supplementing his income after leaving his job as a paramedic in Detroit. The move hadn't been his choice. His mother's declining health had pulled him back to the small town where he'd grown up, a place he'd once been eager to leave behind. His phone buzzed with another ride request. Andre hesitated, then declined it. The address was too far into the rural areas, where roads would be completely impassable. He wasn't desperate enough to risk getting stranded himself. Just one more ride, he promised himself, then I'm calling it a day. The wind suddenly picked up, blasting snow against his car like tiny bullets. Andre slowed even further, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The main highway had been closed for hours, forcing him to take this narrow county road that twisted through farmland and woods. In normal weather, it was a scenic drive. Today, it felt like navigating a white labyrinth with walls that shifted and changed by the minute. Andre was about to turn around when something caught his eye, a faint red glow off to the side of the road, partially obscured by a snowbank. He squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. It looked like taillights. He carefully pulled over, leaving his hazards blinking, and grabbed his heavy winter coat from the back seat. The moment he stepped outside, the cold hit him like a physical blow. The wind tore at his face, and snow immediately began collecting on his eyelashes and beard. Andre trudged toward the red glow, his boots sinking deep with each step. As he got closer, his suspicions were confirmed. It was a car, a small sedan half buried in snow and tilted at an angle that suggested it had slid off the road and into a ditch. "Hello?" he called out, his voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. "Anyone in there?" He brushed snow from the driver's side window and peered in. His heart jumped when he saw an elderly woman slumped in the seat, her eyes closed. She wasn't wearing a heavy coat, just a light cardigan over what looked like a nurse's scrubs. A small bag sat in the passenger seat with a pharmacy logo on it. Andre rapped on the window sharply. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open with visible confusion. Relief flooded through him. At least she was alive. He tried the door handle. It was unlocked, and he pulled it open, crouching down to her level. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" His paramedic training kicked in automatically as he assessed her condition. The woman looked at him with cloudy eyes, shivering violently. I don't know where I am," she said, her words slightly slurred. "I was taking medicine to Richard's nurse." Andre recognized the signs of hypothermia immediately. The car's engine was off. Either it had died or she'd turned it off to conserve gas. Either way, she'd been sitting in freezing temperatures for who knows how long. "My name is Andre," he said clearly. "I'm going to help you." "Can you tell me your name?" "Eleanor," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Eleanor Williams." "Okay, Eleanor. Can you move your fingers and toes for me?" She nodded weakly and demonstrated, which was a good sign. "I need to get you somewhere warm. My car is just up the road. Do you think you can walk if I help you?" Eleanor nodded again, though she looked uncertain. Andre helped her gather her purse and the pharmacy bag, then supported her as she stepped out into the storm. She was lighter than he expected, and her body trembled against his as they slowly made their way to his car. The wind cut through them mercilessly, and Andre found himself hunching over her small frame, trying to shield her from the worst of it. Once he got Eleanor settled in his passenger seat, he cranked the heat as high as it would go and draped his spare blanket around her shoulders. He kept talking to her, knowing it was important to keep her engaged. "How long were you out there, Eleanor?" "I'm not sure. I left around noon to bring Richard his heart medication." She clutched the pharmacy bag tightly. His nurse called me, said they were snowed in and couldn't get to the pharmacy. Andre glanced at the dashboard clock. 4:37 p.m. She could have been stranded for hours. Is Richard your husband? Andre asked, trying to keep her talking while checking his phone. No service. The storm must have affected the cell towers, Eleanor shook her head. No, Richard is... He's family. I'm a retired nurse. I couldn't let him go without his medication. Andre nodded, understanding that drive to help others all too well. He'd felt it his entire career as a paramedic, and even now, he couldn't ignore someone in need. The nearest hospital is in Westbrook, he said, more to himself than to Eleanor. That's about 30 miles from here. Eleanor's eyes widened. Oh, I don't need a hospital, young man. If you could just help me get my car back on the road. That's not happening, Andre said firmly but kindly. Your car is stuck good and you're showing signs of hypothermia. I need to get you checked out. He pulled carefully back onto the road, his wipers fighting a losing battle against the relentless snow. The back roads to Westbrook would be treacherous in these conditions, but he knew them well enough to navigate safely. He hoped. Tell me about yourself, Eleanor, Andre said, keeping his tone conversational while his eyes remained fixed on the barely visible road. Have you lived around here long? Eleanor's shivering had lessened somewhat in the car's growing warmth. All my life, she said, except for college and a few years after that. My daughter tried to get me to move closer to the city, but I love my little house. I've been there 40 years now. What about your daughter? Should we try to call her when we get service? A small smile crossed Eleanor's face. Oh, she's busy today. Very important meetings. She's always busy these days. Andre nodded, understanding all too well how family could be simultaneously the most important thing in your life, and sometimes the hardest to reach. His own sister hadn't returned his calls in weeks. The next few miles passed slowly as the storm intensified. Twice they had to stop when visibility dropped to near zero. Andre found himself leaning forward in his seat, straining to see any landmark that might confirm they were still on the right road. Eleanor had fallen quiet, which worried him. Eleanor, you doing okay? She nodded slowly. Just tired. I need you to stay awake for me, Andre said, reaching over to gently touch her arm. Tell me about your nursing career. What was your specialty?
As Eleanor began to speak about her years in the emergency room, Andre navigated around a fallen tree branch.
The road ahead was completely untouched by snowplows or other vehicles. In the distance, he could make out the dim shape of a bridge, the old stone bridge that crossed Miller's Creek. Once they were across that, they'd be about halfway to Westbrook. What neither of them knew, as they slowly made their way through the blinding snow, was that the woman sitting in Andre's passenger seat wasn't just any retired nurse, and the frantic calls being made at the governor's mansion were about more than just another citizen caught in the storm. Sometimes, the most extraordinary connections happen on the most ordinary days, even in the middle of the worst blizzard in 20 years. The old stone bridge appeared through the curtain of snow like a ghost from another time. Andre slowed the car to a crawl, aware that the bridge's surface would be dangerously slick. The creek beneath had swollen with the recent snowmelt, its dark waters churning against the ancient stonework. We used to swim under this bridge in the summers, Eleanor said, her voice stronger now that the car's heater had warmed her. The water was so clear back then, you could see all the way to the bottom. Andre nodded, focusing on keeping the car steady as they crossed. Hard to imagine swimming here when everything's frozen solid. That's life, though, isn't it? Eleanor mused, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Always changing. Nothing stays the same for long. Once they were safely across, Andre relaxed his grip on the steering wheel slightly. The road ahead sloped gently upward, which meant better drainage and hopefully less ice. He checked the time. Almost 5:30 p.m. The short winter day had already surrendered to darkness, making visibility even worse. So you mentioned your daughter, Andre said, hoping to keep Eleanor alert and talking. What does she do? A small, proud smile crossed Eleanor's face. She works, in government. Very busy job. Too busy, if you ask me. Must be difficult in this storm. Government's probably all hands on deck right now. Eleanor's smile faded slightly. She's probably worried sick about me. I should have called before I left, but I was in such a hurry to get Richard his medicine. Once we get to Westbrook, you can call her, Andre assured her. Phone service should be better there. What Andre didn't say was that he was growing increasingly concerned about their situation. The storm was intensifying and they'd pass no other vehicles for miles. If they got stuck out here, help might be hours away, if it could reach them at all. "Tell me about yourself, Andre," Eleanor said suddenly. "What brought you to our little corner of nowhere?" Andre glanced at her, surprised by the direct question. Most passengers kept to themselves or stared at their phones. Then again, this wasn't a normal ride. "My mother got sick," he said simply. "Moved back to take care of her." "That's admirable. Not everyone would do that," Andre shrugged. "Didn't have much choice. My sister lives overseas and there's no one else." "There's always a choice," Eleanor said softly. "That's what makes decisions like yours matter." Something in her tone made Andre think she understood more than most people would. He wondered what choices she'd faced in her life. "You said you were a paramedic before?" Eleanor asked. "Yeah, for almost 8 years in Detroit." "Good job, but—" He trailed off, not wanting to get into the reasons he'd left. The burnout. The nightmares. The feeling that no matter how many people he saved, it was never enough. "But it takes a toll," Eleanor finished for him. "I remember that feeling from my nursing days. Especially in the ER." Andre nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Exactly." A sudden gust of wind rocked the car, sending it sliding sideways before Andre could correct their course. Eleanor gasped, grabbing the dashboard. "Sorry about that," Andre said, heart pounding as he regained control. "Wind's getting worse. You're doing fine," Eleanor assured him. "Much better than I did, obviously." They shared a small laugh that eased some of the tension. Andre realized he liked this straightforward old woman with her calm demeanor and kind eyes. There was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place what it was. The next few miles passed slowly as they navigated through increasingly difficult conditions. Twice they had to stop completely when visibility dropped to 0 during intense snow squalls. During one of these pauses, Andre noticed Eleanor rummaging through her purse. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just looking for my pills," she said. "I should have taken them an hour ago." Andre frowned. "You need medication too?" Eleanor nodded, still searching. "Heart condition. Nothing dramatic, but I need to stay on schedule with these." This added a new urgency to their journey. Andre knew from his paramedic days that interrupted medication schedules could sometimes lead to serious complications, especially with heart patients. "Found them," Eleanor said triumphantly, holding up a small pill bottle. She fumbled with the cap, her fingers still not fully recovered from the cold. "Let me," Andre said, taking the bottle and opening it for her. He handed it back along with his water bottle. "Thank you," Eleanor said, swallowing her pill. "You know, my daughter always tells me I should wear one of those medical alert necklaces, but I'm too stubborn. Sounds like she worries about you." "Too much. Sometimes." Eleanor gazed out at the swirling snow and, "Oh, she forgets I took care of myself for decades before she was born. And for many years while raising her alone." Andre could hear the complex mix of pride, love, and frustration in her voice. The same emotions he often felt when dealing with his own mother. The push and pull between caring for someone and respecting their independence was never simple. The snow had eased slightly, so Andre put the car back in drive and continued on. According to the dashboard GPS, which flickered in and out of service, they were still about 12 miles from Westbrook. Under normal conditions, that would be a quick drive. Today it might as well have been 100 miles. "I think there's a gas station about 3 miles ahead," Eleanor said, peering through the windshield. "Peterson's. They might have a phone we could use." Andre nodded gratefully. His fuel gauge was getting uncomfortably low, and a chance to stretch their legs and check in would be welcome. As they drove, Eleanor told stories about the area, which farms belonged to which families, how the landscape had changed over the decades, the time the creek flooded so badly they had to evacuate the entire valley. Her knowledge was encyclopedic, and Andre found himself drawn into her tales of a community that had faced hardships before and survived. "There it is," Eleanor said suddenly, pointing ahead to a faint glow through the snow. Peterson's. The small gas station looked like a mirage in the white landscape, its lights creating a halo in the swirling snow. A single plow was parked outside, its engine running. Andre pulled in carefully, relief washing over him at this small sign of civilization. Inside, they found the station owner, a burly man named Frank, and 2 stranded travelers who had sought shelter when the main highway closed. A small wood stove in the corner gave off welcome heat. "Eleanor Williams," Frank exclaimed when they walked in. "What in God's name are you doing out in this weather?" "Getting myself into trouble, apparently," Eleanor replied with a small smile. "This kind man rescued me when my car went off the road near Miller's Creek." Frank turned to Andre with newfound respect. "You got her all the way from there in this storm? That's something." Andre shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. "Just happened to be passing by. Is your phone working?" "We need to let her family know she's okay." Frank's face grew serious. "Lines are down, but I've got a satellite phone for emergencies, and I'd say this counts." He looked at Eleanor meaningfully. "Half the state's looking for you, Eleanor." Eleanor sighed. "I was afraid of that." Andre looked between them, confused. "What do you mean, half the state?" Frank stared at him in disbelief. "You don't know who she is?" Before Andre could answer, the door burst open, bringing with it a swirl of snow and a state trooper in full winter gear. "Mrs. Williams?" the trooper said, relief evident in his voice when he spotted Eleanor. "Thank God, we've been searching everywhere." "I'm fine, Officer Chen," Eleanor said calmly. "Thanks to this gentleman here." The trooper turned to Andre, extending a gloved hand. "Sir, you have no idea what you've done today. The governor's been beside herself with worry." Andre shook the hand automatically, his mind struggling to process the officer's words. "The governor?" Eleanor gave him a slightly embarrassed smile. "I was going to tell you eventually. My daughter, Catherine Williams, she's the governor." Andre stood frozen, his mind racing back through their conversations in the car. The comments about her daughter being in government, being busy with important meetings. The way she spoke about the area with such authority. It all made sense now. "The governor is your daughter," he repeated, still trying to absorb this new reality. Eleanor nodded. "And she's probably turning the state upside down looking for me right now." Officer Chen was already on his radio, confirming Eleanor's safety to someone on the other end. Andre could hear the relief in the response, though he couldn't make out the exact words. "Mrs. Williams, we have a medical team standing by at the hospital in Westbrook," the trooper said. "And the governor is on her way there now. Can I escort you?" Eleanor looked at Andre. "Only if he comes too. I wouldn't be here without him." The trooper nodded. "Of course, ma'am. We have vehicles better equipped for these conditions." As they prepared to leave, Frank pulled Andre aside. "Do you have any idea what you did today?" "That woman's daughter runs our state. And in case you haven't been paying attention to politics lately, she's likely headed for Washington next." Andre looked over at Eleanor, who was now talking animatedly with Officer Chen, showing no signs of the frail, disoriented woman he'd pulled from a snowbank just hours ago. "She's just someone who needed help," he said simply. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, son, I have a feeling your life is about to change." Andre wasn't sure what to make of that prediction as they stepped back out into the storm. He only knew that what had started as an ordinary day had become anything but, and that the journey wasn't over yet. The convoy of 3 police SUVs moved steadily through the storm, their heavy tires crunching over the snow-packed roads. Andre sat in the back seat of the middle vehicle, still trying to process everything that had happened. Beside him, Eleanor seemed remarkably calm for someone who had nearly frozen to death just hours earlier. "You're very quiet," she observed, studying his face in the dim light from the dashboard. "Just taking it all in," Andre replied. The heated seats and powerful engine of the police vehicle were a far cry from his struggling Subaru, which Officer Chen had promised would be retrieved once the roads cleared. "Having second thoughts about rescuing me?" Eleanor asked with a hint of humor in her voice. Andre shook his head. "No, ma'am. Just wondering what I'm walking into." "A lot of grateful people," Eleanor said simply. "Starting with me." The trooper driving them glanced in the rearview mirror. "Mrs. Williams isn't exaggerating, sir. The governor had the National Guard on standby. Half the state police force is out looking." Andre nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. He'd never been one for spotlights or recognition. As a paramedic, he'd done his job and moved on to the next call, rarely learning what happened to patients after dropping them at the hospital. "My daughter can be intense," Eleanor admitted with a small smile. "She gets that from her father. But her heart's in the right place." The convoy turned onto a wide street where snowplows had already cleared a path. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing warmly against the dark, snowy night. Several news vans were parked near the entrance, their satellite dishes raised despite the weather. Andre's stomach dropped at the sight. "There's press?" I'm afraid my little adventure made the news, Eleanor sighed. Catherine's very popular and very visible. Before Andre could respond, they pulled up to the emergency entrance where a group of people waited under the covered drive. A tall woman broke away from the group the moment the SUV stopped, rushing toward them as an aide hurried behind her with an umbrella. The back door opened, and Eleanor stepped out with surprising energy for someone her age who had been through such an ordeal. The tall woman embraced her immediately. Mom! Thank God you're all right. Even without an introduction, Andre would have recognized Governor Catherine Williams from the billboards and news coverage. She had her mother's eyes and the same determined set to her jaw, though her hair was dark where Eleanor's was silver. I'm fine, Catherine, Eleanor said, patting her daughter's back. Thanks to this young man. The governor turned to Andre as he awkwardly climbed out of the SUV. Her expression shifted from relief to intense gratitude. You're the one who found my mother? Andre nodded. Andre Thompson, ma'am. It was just, don't you dare say just luck or nothing special, the governor interrupted, extending her hand. You saved my mother's life in the middle of the worst storm we've seen in decades. There's nothing just about that. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. Andre could feel the curious stares of the staffers, security personnel, and medical team watching their exchange. Let's get you both inside, Governor Williams said, gesturing toward the entrance. The doctors want to check you over, Mom. I'm perfectly fine, Eleanor protested. Andre made sure of that. Nevertheless, they were both ushered into the hospital where a medical team was waiting. The governor walked alongside them, peppering Andre with questions about where he'd found Eleanor and the condition she'd been in. Your mother handled it like a pro, Andre said. Must be those nursing instincts, the governor smiled. She never really stopped being a nurse. Did she tell you she still volunteers at the free clinic twice a month? Andre wasn't surprised. Everything he'd learned about Eleanor in their hours together painted a picture of a woman dedicated to helping others. They were led to separate examination rooms, where doctors checked them over for frostbite and other cold-related injuries. Andre was given the all-clear quickly, but they kept Eleanor longer, monitoring her heart and making sure her medication schedule hadn't been disrupted too badly by the ordeal. While waiting in a small private lounge, Andre was brought coffee and sandwiches by a hospital staffer who seemed oddly nervous around him. Through the window, he could see that the snow had finally stopped falling, though the wind still whipped the fallen snow into dancing spirals under the parking lot lights. The door opened, and Governor Williams entered, looking slightly more relaxed than she had earlier. Mom's going to be fine, she said, sitting across from Andre. They want to keep her overnight for observation, but knowing her, she'll be trying to escape by morning. Andre smiled, recognizing the stubborn independence he'd witnessed during their journey. She's tough. That she is. The governor studied him for a moment. The troopers tell me you were a paramedic before moving here? Andre nodded. 8 years in Detroit, and now you're driving rideshare? He shifted uncomfortably. It's flexible. Lets me take care of my mother. She has MS, understanding crossed the governor's face. That can't be easy. It is what it is, Andre said with a small shrug. It was the same response he gave everyone who expressed sympathy about his situation, a conversation ender that usually worked. But Governor Williams wasn't deterred. The state has several programs that might help you both. I'd like my office to reach out if that's okay. Before Andre could respond, a staff member appeared at the door. Governor, they're ready for the press statement whenever you are. Andre tensed. Press statement? The governor nodded. Just a brief update. People have been worried about my mother. You don't need to mention me, Andre said quickly. Really? Governor Williams looked at him curiously. You don't want recognition for what you did? I just did what anyone would do, Andre insisted. It's not a big deal. The governor's expression softened. Mr. Thompson, in my experience, what anyone would do and what people actually do are very different things. Especially in a crisis, she paused. But I understand if you'd prefer to stay out of the spotlight. I'll respect that. Relief washed over him. Thank you. As the governor prepared to leave, she turned back. One more thing. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything at all? Andre hesitated. He wasn't used to asking for help, and certainly not from someone like the governor. But an idea had been forming in his mind since they'd arrived at the hospital. Actually, he said slowly, there is something, 3 weeks later. Andre stood in a small community center that had been transformed with new medical equipment, supplies, and educational materials. The sign outside read Eastern County Emergency Response Training Center, and inside, a group of 20 local drivers, rideshare operators, taxi drivers, and delivery people sat in rows of chairs, awaiting the start of the first class. Eleanor Williams, looking fully recovered and energetic, arranged handouts at a table near the front of the room. She wore a volunteer badge that identified her as a program instructor. "Nervous?" she asked as Andre reviewed his notes one last time. "A little," he admitted. "Been a while since I taught anyone anything." "You'll be wonderful," Eleanor assured him. "These people want to learn, just like you wanted to when you started as a paramedic." The door opened and Governor Williams entered quietly, trying not to draw attention as she took a seat in the back row. She gave Andre an encouraging nod. The program had come together with remarkable speed, a collaboration between the governor's office, the state health department, and local emergency services. The goal was simple: train ordinary drivers in basic emergency response, creating a network of first responders who could help during crises like the recent blizzard. Andre had been hired as the program's first coordinator, with a salary that allowed him to cut back on his rideshare hours and spend more time with his mother. Eleanor had volunteered immediately to help teach the medical components, bringing decades of nursing experience to the project. Taking a deep breath, Andre stepped to the front of the room. "Welcome, everyone. My name is Andre Thompson. 3 weeks ago, I was just a driver like many of you, trying to make ends meet during the worst storm of the year. I wasn't looking to be a hero. I was just trying to get through another day." He glanced at Eleanor, who smiled encouragingly. "But that day reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that the skills we have, the knowledge we carry, it all matters. Sometimes in ways we never expect. What you're going to learn in this program might seem basic. CPR, how to recognize shock, what to do until professionals arrive. But I promise you, someday it might make all the difference for someone." As Andre continued his introduction, he noticed that the local news crew the governor had invited was filming discreetly from the side of the room. His story had spread throughout the state, despite his initial reluctance for publicity. But Eleanor had convinced him that it could inspire others, and eventually, he'd agreed to limited media coverage of the program launch. After the session ended, most of the participants lingered, asking questions and sharing their own experiences of helping others during emergencies. The governor approached as the crowd thinned. "Impressive start," she said. "Mom tells me you're a natural teacher." Andre smiled, still not entirely comfortable in the governor's presence despite her down-to-earth manner. "Your mother's been the real driving force. I just show up and talk." "Don't sell yourself short," Eleanor chided, joining them. "This program was your idea." It had been a way to turn his chance encounter with Eleanor into something that could help more people. The governor had embraced it immediately, finding funding and cutting through red tape that would normally have delayed such an initiative for months. "We're expanding to 3 more counties next month," Governor Williams said. "The state emergency management director wants to make it a statewide program by next year." Andre shook his head in amazement. Wow. "That's what happens when the right idea meets the right moment," the governor said. "And the right people." Later, as Andre drove home along roads now clear of snow, he reflected on how much his life had changed in such a short time. The same route he'd traveled countless times as a struggling rideshare driver now felt different somehow. The landscape was the same, but his place in it had shifted. His phone rang through the car speakers, his mother calling to remind him to pick up milk on the way home. Such an ordinary request, so wonderfully normal amid all the changes. "Already got it." "Mom," he said, smiling at how some things never changed, no matter how many governors you met or programs you launched. As he turned onto his street, Andre noticed new flowers pushing through the thawing ground along the sidewalk. Early crocuses, tough enough to bloom while patches of snow still lingered in the shadows. Survivors just like Eleanor, just like so many people who face their own storms every day. He'd been right weeks ago in the blizzard, when he told Eleanor that was just doing what anyone would do. The difference was now he understood that anyone had to choose to do it. And sometimes that made all the difference in the world. 6 months had passed since the snowstorm. Summer had swept across the state, bringing humid days and thunderstorms that washed away the last memories of that brutal winter. But for Andre Thompson, Certain memories remained crystal clear. He stood at the back of a large conference room in the state capitol building, watching as Governor Williams addressed the crowd of emergency workers, healthcare professionals, and ordinary citizens who had gathered for the official launch of the statewide emergency response training initiative. What began in a small community center has grown into something remarkable, the governor was saying. In just 6 months, over 500 drivers across 12 counties have completed basic emergency response training. Already, we have documented 23 incidents where program graduates provided critical first aid before ambulances could arrive. Andre shifted his weight uncomfortably. He still wasn't used to wearing a suit, especially in the summer heat. As program director, he'd been told his presence at the ceremony was non-negotiable, despite his preference for staying behind the scenes. From her seat near the front, Eleanor Williams caught his eye and gave him a reassuring smile. At 79, she remained a vital part of the program, having helped design much of the medical curriculum. Her energy seemed boundless, especially when she was teaching. And none of this would have been possible, the governor continued, without the quick thinking and compassion of one person who didn't drive past someone in need during our worst storm in decades. Andre Thompson, would you please join me? A polite round of applause filled the room as Andre made his way reluctantly to the podium. The governor shook his hand warmly and stepped aside, giving him the floor. They had discussed this moment for weeks, and though Andre had tried to get out of it, both Williams women had insisted. He cleared his throat, glancing down at the small note card in his hand before looking up at the expectant faces. I'm not much for public speaking, he began, his deep voice quiet but carrying through the room. What happened during that storm wasn't special. Not to me, anyway. I was just doing what I was trained to do. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But what's happened since then? That's the real story worth telling. It's about all of you and hundreds more like you, who decided that having the knowledge to help someone in crisis was worth your time and effort. As he spoke, Andre found himself thinking of the changes in his own life over the past months. His mother's condition had stabilized with better care, thanks to connections made through the governor's office. His new position came with health insurance that covered treatments they couldn't have afforded before. This program isn't about creating heroes, Andre continued. It's about being prepared when ordinary days turn extraordinary. It's about knowing what to do in those first critical minutes when someone's life hangs in the balance. He looked directly at Eleanor, remembering how close she had come to becoming another tragic statistic that day. Most emergencies don't happen with ambulances nearby. They happen in our homes, on our streets, in our everyday lives. And having someone there who knows even the basics of emergency response can make all the difference. When he finished speaking, the applause was warmer than before. As he returned to his place at the back of the room, several people reached out to shake his hand or pat his shoulder. The governor presented official certificates to the first class of program graduates, and the ceremony concluded with the announcement of additional funding that would extend the initiative statewide by the following year. Afterward, during the reception, Andre found himself cornered by a reporter from the local news station. He'd gotten better at handling these interactions, though they still made him uneasy. Mr. Thompson, there's talk about you receiving the Governor's Medal for Outstanding Citizenship next month. Any comment? Andre shook his head. That's just a rumor. There are plenty of people more deserving. But surely you must feel proud of how far the program has come. It's being looked at by other states as a model. Before Andre could respond, he felt a hand on his arm. Eleanor had appeared beside him, her eyes twinkling with mischief. My daughter needs Mr. Thompson for a moment, she told the reporter smoothly. Perhaps you could interview some of our wonderful graduates instead? As Eleanor led him away, Andre gave her a grateful look. Still rescuing me, I see. Fair exchange, she replied with a laugh. Though I think I'm getting the better end of the deal these days. They made their way to a quieter corner where Governor Williams was deep in conversation with the state's emergency management director. She brightened when she saw them approach. Perfect timing, she said. We were just discussing the rural expansion phase. Tom here thinks we should focus on the mountain communities first, given their isolation during winter storms. Andre nodded. Makes sense. Response times there can be over an hour when the weather's bad. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed the logistics of bringing the training program to remote areas of the state. Andre found himself speaking with growing confidence about budgets, training sites, and volunteer recruitment, all things that would have been foreign to him a year earlier. As the conversation wound down, the governor checked her watch. I hate to cut this short, but I have a budget meeting in 10 minutes. Andre, can we catch up tomorrow about the community college partnership? Yes, ma'am, Andre replied. Even after months of working together, he couldn't quite bring himself to call her Catherine, as she had repeatedly invited him to do. After the governor departed, Eleanor linked her arm through Andre's. Walk an old lady to her car? Outside, the summer evening was warm and golden, a stark contrast to the howling winter night when they'd first met. Eleanor's driver waited patiently beside a modest sedan. She had refused the official security detail her daughter had tried to arrange, insisting she was just a retired nurse, not the Queen of England. You did well today, Eleanor said as they walked slowly across the parking lot, though you still look like you'd rather face another blizzard than another camera. Andre smiled. That obvious? Only to someone who knows what to look for. She patted his arm. You know, when I was trapped in my car that day, I wasn't afraid at first, just annoyed at my own foolishness. But as the hours passed and no one came along that road, she paused, her expression growing serious. I started thinking about all the things I hadn't said to people, all the letters unwritten, calls unmade, the good I still wanted to do. Andre nodded, understanding. He'd had similar thoughts during his darkest days after leaving his paramedic job, the nagging sense of unfinished purpose. When you showed up, Eleanor continued, it wasn't just about being rescued from the snow. It was a second chance to do those things. She looked up at him. We've both been given second chances, haven't we? Andre thought about the past 6 months, how his life had transformed from endless rideshare shifts to meaningful work that used his skills and experience. How his mother's health had improved with proper care, how the constant worry about money had finally eased. I never thought of it that way, he admitted, but you're right. They reached Eleanor's car and her driver opened the door for her. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, Eleanor said before getting in. Richard, the man I was bringing medicine to that day, he's having a birthday party next weekend. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. Would you come? Andre was surprised by the invitation. Richard? Your daughter mentioned he was family. Eleanor nodded. My late husband's brother, Catherine's uncle. He's been living with Parkinson's for years now, but he still throws the best parties. Her eyes twinkled. He's dying to meet the famous Andre Thompson. Famous is a stretch, Andre said with a small laugh. But sure, I'd like that. After saying goodbye to Eleanor, Andre walked to his own car, a newer model that reliably started even on the coldest mornings, purchased with his first few paychecks from the new job. As he drove home through the familiar streets, he thought about their conversation. Second chances, the phrase echoed in his mind. When he reached his neighborhood, he made an impulsive turn down a side street and parked in front of a small house with a well-tended garden. His mother sat on the front porch in her wheelchair, watering plants arranged on a specially built table at her height. She waved when she saw him. You're home early, she called as he walked up the path. How was the big ceremony? Less terrible than I expected, Andre admitted, sitting on the porch step beside her wheelchair. Made a speech and everything. His mother beamed with pride. My boy, the public speaker. Who would have thought? Andre smiled, remembering how he'd once been the shyest kid in his school. How life had a way of pushing you toward the things you tried to avoid. Got an invitation today, he said. To the governor's uncle's birthday party. His mother raised her eyebrows. Look at you moving up in the world. It's not like that, Andre protested. Eleanor, Mrs. Williams, she's just a friend, his mother finished for him. I know, and that's even more remarkable than knowing the governor, if you ask me. Andre thought about the unlikely friendship that had developed between himself and the governor's mother, how they came from different worlds but shared a common language of service and care, how sometimes the most meaningful connections came from the most unexpected places. Yeah, he agreed, it really is. As the summer evening settled around them, mother and son sat in comfortable silence. From the disaster of a winter storm had come this moment of peace, a reminder that second chances, like the seasons, could bring unexpected warmth after the coldest days. The birthday party for Richard Williams turned out to be anything but the small family gathering Eleanor had described. The sprawling lakeside property was filled with at least 60 people, ranging from elderly friends to young grandchildren running across the lawn in the late summer sunshine. Andre stood awkwardly on the edge of the festivities, holding a glass of lemonade and wondering if coming had been a mistake. He recognized a few faces from the state government and the emergency response program, but most were strangers who seemed to know each other well. "There you are," came Eleanor's voice from behind him. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." Andre turned with relief. "Got a little lost on those back roads. Your directions were perfect, but all these lakes look the same to someone who didn't grow up here. Well, I'm glad you made it." Eleanor took his arm. "Come meet the guest of honor." She led him through clusters of people, many of whom nodded respectfully to her as they passed. Eleanor seemed to know everyone, greeting them by name and often asking about children or grandchildren. Under a large oak tree, an older man sat in a wheelchair surrounded by a small group of people. Despite the obvious tremors in his hands, a sign of his Parkinson's, his eyes were bright and alert, and he was in the middle of telling what seemed to be a hilarious story, judging by the laughter around him. "Richie," Eleanor said as they approached, "I've brought someone special for you to meet." The man looked up, his gaze sharp and appraising as it landed on Andre. "So this is the famous snow angel I've heard so much about." Andre felt his face grow warm. "Just Andre Thompson, sir. And happy birthday." Richard waved away the formality. "No, sir, needed here. You saved my sister-in-law's life, which means you saved me from my niece's eternal wrath. Do you have any idea how terrifying Catherine is when she's worried about her mother?" "I've gotten some hints," Andre admitted with a small smile, thinking of the governor's intensity during the search. Sit, Richard insisted, gesturing to an empty chair beside him. "Eleanor tells me you were a paramedic in Detroit." "I worked there for 20 years. Trauma surgeon at Metro Hospital." Andre's eyebrows rose in surprise as he took the offered seat. "Metro was our main drop-off. When were you there?" "Retired in 2008, before your time probably. Just missed you." "I started in 2010. Richard's eyes lit up. "Then you must have known Dr. Phillips? Tall woman, always wore colorful scrub caps?" "The miracle worker of the ER," Andre said with a nod. "She taught me more in my first year than all my training combined." Just like that, the ice was broken. For the next hour, Andre and Richard swapped stories about Metro Hospital, emergency medicine, and the particular challenges of working in an urban trauma center. It was the most Andre had spoken about his paramedic days since leaving the profession. He found himself laughing at Richard's dry humor and nodding in recognition at the shared experiences despite the years that separated their service. "Why'd you leave?" Richard asked eventually, his voice gentler. The question wasn't intrusive, just understanding. One medical professional to another. Andre looked down at his glass. "Burnout. Bad call involving kids. The usual story." Richard nodded, no further explanation needed. "It gets to all of us eventually. No shame in that." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when a young boy, perhaps 9 or 10, ran up to Richard with a model airplane. "Grandpa, look what Dad fixed for me." Richard examined the plane with exaggerated seriousness. "Excellent craftsmanship. But did you thank your father properly?" "Yes, sir." "Good man. Now this is my new friend Andre. He used to put people back together just like I did." The boy's eyes widened. "Like a doctor?" "A paramedic," Andre explained. "We're the ones who help people before they get to the hospital." "Cool." The boy studied Andre with new interest. "Have you ever delivered a baby in an elevator?" "Grandpa did that once," Andre laughed. "Not in an elevator, but I did deliver twins in the back of an ambulance during a blackout." "Whoa." The boy looked impressed. "You should come to my school for career day. We never have paramedics, just boring lawyers like my dad." From a few yards away, a man who was clearly the boy's father called out, "I heard that, Tyler." Richard chuckled as the boy ran off again. "That's my grandson." No filter whatsoever. As the afternoon went on, Andre found himself drawn into the family gathering in a way he hadn't expected. Eleanor introduced him to Richard's children and their spouses, to old family friends, and to a few state officials who had worked with the emergency response program. Everyone seemed to know who he was, but treated him with a natural warmth that put him at ease. Later, as the golden light of late afternoon slanted across the lawn, Andre found a quiet moment with Eleanor by the lake's edge. They watched as several children skipped stones across the still water. "Richard seems like a remarkable man," Andre observed. Eleanor nodded. "He is. When my husband died, Richard stepped in to help me raise Catherine. He was there for every school play, Every graduation, every heartbreak. He's as much Catherine's father as her biological one ever was. Andre thought about that. About family bonds that went beyond blood. About the people who showed up when it mattered most. "Thank you for inviting me today," he said. "I almost didn't come." Eleanor looked at him curiously. "Why not?" Andre hesitated. "Didn't think I'd fit in. Governor's family, state officials. Not exactly my usual crowd. And now?" He smiled. "Now I'm wondering why I was worried. Richard alone was worth the drive." Eleanor patted his hand. "Good, because he wants you to come to the lake house for the Labor Day weekend. The whole family will be there. Catherine even blocks it off on her calendar a year in advance. No state business allowed." Andre raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Me? But that's family time." "Yes," Eleanor said simply, her eyes twinkling. Before Andre could respond, they were interrupted by the appearance of Governor Williams, who had arrived late due to a morning meeting. "Mom." "There you are," she said, giving Eleanor a kiss on the cheek. "And Andre. Glad you could make it." She looked more relaxed than Andre had ever seen her, dressed in casual clothes with her hair loose around her shoulders. "Your uncle's been telling me stories about his days at Metro," Andre said. The governor laughed. "I hope they were the PG-rated versions. Some of Uncle Richard's hospital stories are not for the faint of heart. I heard my name being taken in vain," Richard called as his wheelchair was pushed toward them by one of his grandchildren. "Catherine, you're late. We've already eaten all the cake." "Saved you a piece in the kitchen, Governor," the child pushing the wheelchair piped up. "Thank you, Lily. At least someone in this family has manners." The governor smiled at the girl, then turned back to Andre. "Has Mom invited you to Labor Day yet?" Andre nodded. "Just now, actually." "Good. It's the one weekend of the year when I'm not allowed to talk politics or check my phone. We swim, eat too much, and play board games that Richard always cheats at. I create strategic advantages," Richard corrected with dignity. The family banter continued, and Andre found himself drawn into their easy rapport. It was strange to see the governor this way, not as the polished political figure he'd come to know through their work together, but as Catherine, Richard's niece and Eleanor's daughter, a woman who laughed freely and teased her family members. As the evening drew to a close and people began to leave, Andre helped pack up some of the folding chairs and tables. He was carrying a stack of chairs to a storage shed when he encountered one of Richard's sons, a man about his own age who practiced law in the state capitol. "Dad says you're joining us for Labor Day," the man said, holding the shed door open. "If that's all right," Andre replied, suddenly uncertain again. The man looked puzzled. "Why wouldn't it be? After what you did for Grandma Eleanor?" He shook his head. "Look, our family doesn't stand on ceremony. If you've been invited, it's because they want you there, not because they feel obligated." There was a straightforwardness in his tone that Andre appreciated. He nodded. "Thanks. I'll be there." Later, as Andre drove home under a sky turning purple with twilight, he reflected on the day. Something had shifted, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. The line between the professional relationship he had with the governor and Eleanor and something more personal was beginning to blur. His phone rang through the car speakers, his mother calling. "Hey, Mom, how was the fancy party?" she asked, the smile evident in her voice. "Not fancy at all, actually. Just a family cookout. Met the governor's uncle. He used to be a surgeon at Metro, if you can believe that." "Small world," his mother commented. "Did you have a good time?" Andre thought about the genuine laughter, the stories shared with Richard, the way Eleanor had introduced him to everyone not as the man who rescued me, but as Andre, who runs our emergency response program. "Yeah," he said, surprised to realize how true it was. "I really did." "Good. You deserve some fun, working as hard as you do." When he got home, Andre found himself looking at the calendar on his kitchen wall, counting the days until Labor Day weekend. He circled the date with a pen before he could talk himself out of it. The next morning, Andre arrived at his office to find a package waiting on his desk. Inside was a framed photo taken at Richard's birthday party, a candid shot of Andre and Richard deep in conversation, both laughing at some shared medical humor. A note in Eleanor's elegant handwriting read simply, "Family isn't always blood." Andre placed the frame on his desk, Next to the official certificate from the governor's office and a thank you card from a truck driver, whose life had been saved by one of their program graduates. Different reminders of how a single snowy day had changed everything. Outside his window, the summer was beginning to fade, hints of autumn appearing in the occasional yellow leaf. Soon another winter would come, bringing its own storms and challenges, but this time, more people would be ready, including Andre himself in ways that went far beyond emergency medicine.